Everybody, this is Jamie Hope with Signed, Sealed, Delivered, and today I have a super awesome person on my show with me. Her name is Jen Satterly, and Jen has a really unique story. Lots of cool stuff you're doing, lots of cool experiences you've had, and also some challenging things along the way. So, hi, Jen, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Obviously I follow you and stalk you guys a little bit because I love what you're doing. And, we talk once in a while and I'm like, I got to have Jen on the show. Your story is just so unique. So, for those that don't know, Jen is founder of All Secure Foundation, and it's a foundation that helps Special Forces warriors heal from the trauma of war and them and their families. And Jen is married to Tom Satterly, former Delta Force, part of a group called the Unit that was just declassified a couple years ago, correct?
Yep, you got it.
Yep. So basically, what that means is Tom Satterly is a real life Jason Bourne, and Jen gets to snuggle with him every night. So, what's that like, Jen?
Depends on the night.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So tell us about how you met Tom is so crazy. You have such as a woman to do what you did to meet him. I mean, I don't think there's too many women that have, or if any, maybe that have really gotten to do what you do. So tell us how you met Tom.
Yeah, sure. So we did not have a very impressive meeting actually at first. He had he didn't even know who I was. So back in 2013 when we met, I was a film and photographer and did TV commercials and fashion stuff. So I was in the commercial sector of film and photography work. I was hired and brought on to do special operations campaign, and I said no the first 3 times just because it wasn't in my wheelhouse. I felt I didn't know anything about special operations at all. And so I had all these preconceived notions about what it would be, and I just didn't feel like, oh, that's not really for me. The guy who brought me in and introduced me and really kind of got this whole thing kicked off said, it's really too late. Like, I've already told them you're coming. And so just do this project.
And you really can't say no to the Warriors, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's in their vocabulary.
Totally. And he was a former Army Ranger too, and actually spent some time in Somalia right after Tom had left. So he was basically like, you're doing this, and then if you don't ever want to do it again, that's fine. I'll find a replacement for you. So I went in and I filmed basically a commercial type of thing that would run in movie theaters. So it wasn't the action stuff. It was very much of my wheelhouse of like action, cut, do it again. In fact, Tom joked with me after. He's like, I didn't really even know who you were. I didn't talk to Tom. I was in director mode, and I get very, very laser focused and very demanding when I'm in mode. So it's like, I was very intimidated at first, working with special operations, and the 3.5-hour ride there. I'm, going over all my notes and everything I need. But as soon as it's time to go, I'm bossing them around, and they're all like,
they're like, who is this chick bossing us around? What the heck?
I'm like, you guys are 15 minutes late. We are on a schedule.
Nice. Aren't they taught not to be late?
Exactly. But, this wasn't a military thing per se. So they were just, on their own vibe. But I learned about these things called RMTs, or realistic military training exercises. And I had never heard of them. I assumed that the military trained all the time, of course. But I didn't know that they trained in a where they replicated what they were going to do overseas in the capacity of having maybe 100 different role players from that country that they're going to. So they look the part, they dress the part, they don't break role at all. So they are speaking. The first one I went on was an Afghan. So all of these people are Afghanis. They're all wearing clothes. Most of them are U.S. citizens who, maybe have grown up here or have moved here and wanted to help out the U.S. cause. So It's really, it's like
Wow.
the anthropologist in me. I was an anthropology major at first. Was like my head was exploding between that and wanting to be a National Geographic photographer. I was like,
Oh, wow.
why did I say no to this in the first place?
Right.
Fear, right? A fear of the unknown. But
Yep.
I went on this first exercise and I was like, I want to do this now. I mean, there's Black Hawks that are so close with the guys that are fast roping that my hair was literally standing on end like this. And, Tom was actually with me on that exercise. He was kind of helping walk through. And that's where we really first got the chance to talk and stuff. But it was like kind of awkward because I'm like, can you hold my shirt down? Like, I'm
He's
filming
like,
like
no.
this.
He's like, no.
Yeah. I had like a sports bra, like very activity kind of thing, but my shirt went all the way up.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't give a crap about that because I'm like, you know what, people see me in a swimming suit before, it's all right. But it's blowing up in my face and I can't see to shoot. So I'm like, hey, I know we just met, but can you hold my shirt down? And holding this camera up. And but then, we got to talking and we're very, very different people from very different worlds. And probably that was the attraction. So
That usually happens. It does seem like opposites. You always seem to see that where you're like, how are they even a couple? Because, but they do see, I think you sharpen each other when, I think a lot of times too, like that challenge, I think it's almost that challenge too. Like nobody just wants a yes man or a yes girl. Well, at least I guess I wouldn't, but most people don't. But I mean, but you were going on these training missions. And so you were in some situations that were very lifelike. And it's not like, if I remember correct, when you were telling your story before, it's like if you got hurt, like you can't sit there and be like, "Hey, stop, I'm hurt." Like you just had to keep going, or like you didn't want to mess up their mission, right? Tell me about that a little bit.
Absolutely. I think it's probably the part of me that respected them so much in the work that they were doing and the seriousness of it. You think, oh, this is role playing and people are in and out of character. No. From the moment the exercise starts, everyone is laser focused on that mission. And so I might be with a team. I primarily worked with SEAL teams, probably 80% of the time, Green Berets and Army Rangers the other times that I would embed with them for a few weeks at a time. And man, when it was mission time, everyone is in that role because what they're doing is practicing their mission, their combat mission that they're getting ready to do. So many of the times that team had lost people the iteration before their last deployment. So, I would have a lot of people tease me, my girlfriend's like, oh my gosh, you're going out with the SEALs for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, it's not like that. It's not about abs and, things like that. These guys might not come back home and every single one of them know it. And they are training. They're training for their mission. They're training for their lives. They're training for the guy to the left and right of them, to their life. So, yeah, there were times where I got knocked down a hill, like on accident, because it's pitch dark. They work at night. And I was always trying to make myself as invisible as possible. My job was to get the footage and record everything that they did, every movement, so that their command can watch afterwards.
Wow. No pressure at all, like getting knocked down a hill.
Oh my God, is my camera on? Oh my God. Did I just miss that? Oh my God. Yeah.
Rolling down a hill, like, nope, just a flesh wound. Move on, please.
Totally, like picking grass out of my teeth.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, but I mean, you got to be tough to do that. You have to be tough-minded. And I'm sure there were times that, you weren't, I'm sure they didn't baby you. I'm sure there were times maybe even they were irritated by your presence, maybe. So you just had to have a thick skin, right? Like you just had to be like, yeah, toughen up, right?
Oh, yeah. And it's funny because I'm not a prude by any nature, and my mom is very much like, and she's not either, but she does not like cuss words at all. And so I wouldn't even realize I'd be with them for like 30 days and I'd come back talking like them. And my mom's like, if you talk that way, you will never be able to get a job. I'm like, if I don't talk this way, I won't keep my job.
That's awesome.
You got to get in there.
Right.
It's not like
I hear you. I
yeah,
grew up with boys. I mean, I grew
me
up with the
too.
wrestlers, the wrestling team. I think I sent you a picture. I was like the creepy, I actually looked like a creepy little kid because I was like holes in my pants. I mean, I was just a weird little kid, man. Like, and so, but I was always with the guy. So I hear you like, and I do, I can have a potty mouth myself sometimes. And my mom's like, Jamie, I'm like, I'm sorry, so
I
I
know.
hear you. But so now you're doing this mission and then you meet Tom, and if I recall correct, he had like the smoothest pickup line
Oh
ever.
my
So
God.
tell
You
us
know,
about that.
he had better lines with his ex-wife, so I was kind of jealous that they got like better line than I got. But yeah, I after we had like I said, the first kind of time that we had gotten together, neither of us had talked to each other. We weren't on each other's radar. And then as we started filming and as I started going on these iterations, I started to talk to him because he was really, really quiet when I met him. Like very, very quiet, very within, very professional. He kind of had this air like he was the leader of the gang, like
Was
everybody.
he?
Yes, everyone kind of followed Tom, and
Wow.
he could give somebody a look and they just snap to it because it's
Oh,
like,
wow.
okay. So I had this respect and distance for him, like, okay, I don't
Uh-huh.
know much. I didn't even know what Delta Force was when I met him. I literally
Oh,
had no
wow.
clue. Somebody said, well, like he was in Black Hawk Down, like as they're walking me to meet him, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that movie, and they're like, yeah, like he was a command sergeant major of Delta Force. I'm like, I don't know what that means. They're
So
like,
you look it up later and you're like, holy
yeah,
cow.
yes.
So what was his line? I'm sure everybody's
So
curious
his
to know.
great pickup line is he walked up to me and said, "So you friended me on LinkedIn," and I just looked at him and I'm like, "Yeah, I add a lot of people to LinkedIn, like
Like
professional
he's
network
special.
site." Yeah,
And that was all she wrote, right? You
yeah. I
instantly
just
fell
kind
in
of looked at
love.
him like, "That's a great first talk."
And
Great.
then what happened from there? How did you guys connect and how was your relationship formed from there?
So we both were going through a tough time. He had already separated from his wife 8 or 9 months before. And actually, when I met him with his son, who was 14 at the time, and actually spent a whole lot more time talking to Thomas than I did him. Just a real great kid. And
Mhm.
I was going through tough times in my marriage. And so we really kind of bonded through going through kind of tough stuff
Sure.
together
Mhm.
and really just started forming this friendship, long distance friendship. He lived in North Carolina still. I was in St. Louis. And then it was just one of those things where you're like, I think this might be my person. And to know that
Wow.
really early on is a really strange feeling. It's really difficult to untangle. A
Sometimes you just know, don't
marriage.
you? Did you feel
Yeah,
like you knew pretty quick then? You just felt right away, like just that there's an inexplicable connection sometimes,
there
right?
was. There was this connection between us. And initially, I thought he's good as a friend. I didn't really think of him romantically. The funny thing, I wasn't attracted to him at first. So it was really just, he was very funny and charismatic. The more I got to know him and the more we would go on these exercises, we just always were always together, like always found ourselves kind of seeking each other out and hanging out and
Hmm.
having these really great, deep 3, 4 hour conversations, and to the point where we're like, yeah, I think there's something here.
And
So
what a lot of people don't know, like you said, Tom was, in Delta Force, part of this even specialized group called the unit, was once classified. Like you said, Tom was in the Battle of Mogadishu, which is depicted in Black Hawk Down. He was actually there when and assisted with the capture of Saddam Hussein. And I remember him telling his story, and it's in his book too. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that, I mean, I was thinking about it this morning, and I hope this isn't an offensive thing to say. It was kind of funny, but oh, Are you still there? You were freezing.
Yeah.
Okay, there. Oh, okay. It looked like you froze up. I was thinking like, geez, Tom is kind of like, and I don't mean it in this regard, but kind of like the Forrest Gump of like military, because Forrest Gump was always at these pivotal moments in
Mhm.
American history. He just always, in the
Right.
movie, he's just kind of, Elvis, he helps him with the dance and then he got to meet the president. It was like, I was thinking, Tom, I mean, geez, he's at, I mean, I'm sure it's places he would rather not be, but the Battle of Mogadishu. He was there when in the capture of Saddam Hussein to the point where he told Saddam, for people who don't know, he told Saddam Hussein he looks like dirty Uncle Fester, and
He did.
Saddam Hussein spit on him, and Tom's response was, "That's okay, you'll be dead soon." Right? That was his
Yeah.
response. So I mean, you're not
Great
talking
Tom.
about. You're not talking about. I mean, we respect all our veterans, but this is a guy who's been on thousands of capture and kill missions, a lot that are still classified that I'm sure even you can't know about. So, you're developing this relationship with this man, and talk about that pivotal moment that you guys shared that was a complete life changer for him, and I know for you too.
There were a few. I don't know
When
if you
you
have
when
something.
you when you were rapping and you guys were going out and Tom said, "I'll catch up with you guys later," and he
Oh yeah,
almost didn't.
that one.
Yeah.
um, it's funny because when you say that we have had pivotal moments. We've been married 5 years last week, and we joke that it's been like 10 years of any other marriage, just because there's been so much
Sure.
in those 5 years, 7 years that we've been together. But when we had met, so we met in May. Really started talking not until late June, July. So in August, there was a training iteration that was happening in Ohio. And, we had gone out like normal, filming, getting ready, setting. It was a daytime exercise or experience. So usually they were in evenings, like I said, but sometimes if they were doing intel all the way through mission. So that's why sometimes we were there for a very long time, as they were gathering all the information. That's what they were doing during this day, was gathering information. So we're kind of following teams, and I'm filming, recording. We had a couple guys in the car with us. We get back to the hotel. We didn't have to work the next day. So it was like a rare Sunday off. And, everybody's kind of in good spirits about that, because for them, that means like, oh, let's go to the bar, let's drink, let's sleep in past,
Right.
5 in the morning, and get to have a little bit of downtime. So everybody was in really good spirits except for Tom. And I noticed that he was just really, really quiet. And he could be quiet, especially early on when his PTS was raging. I mean, just raging out of control. And, he was always with the group. He was never very solitary or alone. But for some reason, that day he said, I'm just going to sit in the car. I need to take a phone call. I thought it might have been with his ex, and he just wanted the privacy. So I kind of helped usher some of the guys along too, like, hey, come on, let's go, set all of our gear down, take a quick shower. We'll meet up in 2 hours, at the bar or something. I think most of the guys were like, screw it, I'm going to the bar. I'll see you. I'll see you down there. We don't care if we're gross or not. So Tom just kind of double checked on him, like, you're okay? And he's like, yeah, I'll see you. I'll see you down at the bar a little bit later. And there's just something in that godlike moment, where something bigger than you is kind of tapping you on the shoulder.
You
Like,
just had an overwhelming intuitive discernment that something was awry.
yes. And I couldn't put my finger on it. But then I just started obsessively texting him, just because if he was on a call, I didn't want to disrupt it.
Mm-hmm.
But and Tom was always very responsive with me. So if I texted something, 2 seconds later I have a text, and I didn't hear anything. And I thought, okay, maybe he's on a call, maybe he's walking, getting fresh air. I don't know what he's doing, but just something didn't feel right. So I was like the pesky friend, like, hey, are you okay? Is everything going all right? Do you need anything? Do you want me to come back to the car? And it might sound a little crazy to other people, like, gosh, you guys were just friends. But again, there was just this, people have even asked, like, how did you know? I didn't know, but I just felt something was off. And
he had a guardian that was looking out for him, that was trying to get you to intervene.
Exactly. I was getting a tap from his guardian angel going, get in there. And so I just stayed persistent and contacting him. And finally, everybody was meeting down in the bar. Everybody was there except for Tom, and that was rare. Tom was usually the first in the room and last to leave. And so I just texted, "Hey, you're late. Everybody's here. What's going on?" And I got a text back, "I'm on my way." And that was it. That was all I had heard for a very long time. And about 6 months after that, he said, "I was sitting in the car with a gun in my lap, and the only thoughts in my head was, should I put it to my head or in my mouth?" And I'd ask, "Did you think about your son? Did you think about your ex-wife? Did you think," I wasn't presumptuous enough to say, "Did you think of me?"
Right.
Friend of a few months, but did you think of people who love and care for you, including me? Because I did very much care for him as a human being. And he said, "No, I didn't think of any of it. I literally just was so done with feeling like a burden to my family, my friends. Here I was on this super fast, high-speed train for 25 years, traveling all over the world, doing these important missions and campaigns. And now, after retirement, which is where we see so many people fall into kind of the pit hole of what's next, is he didn't see a next. So he just felt hopelessness."
And that's such a important thing for people to know, because obviously we're losing, they say 22 veterans a day to suicide. And you think, especially with someone like Tom, you see him as a valuable person. He did not see the value in himself because of the PTS he was struggling from. And he felt like he was a nuisance. Like you said, for them, they're in that state where it's not that they're being selfish, and it's not that they're not thinking of their family. In fact, they're thinking that they're trying to not be a burden to their family. They just don't see it, from the family's perspective. So, right. So, so you guys fast forward, you guys get married, and you start on this journey together. And, this is important for a lot of, especially families and women, to be watching right now, especially women of veterans, and especially those who have deployed to other countries in war and combat, because PTS is something I think sometimes people, even though there's a lot of education out there about it now, I feel like there's still not enough where people understand the warning signs. So, talk about it from the perspective of being a wife. What did it look like living with Tom, and obviously he's going to have a big measure of it because he has seen so much. So what happened in your marriage, and was it early on? Was there a honeymoon period or was it pretty much right away?
We're in our honeymoon period now. So we've gone in reverse. And I always joke about that. We started where most people end up divorced. And then we worked our way into a honeymoon phase where we're at now, 7 years later. But I told Tom, and I said, "Listen, I don't know what it is, but I feel like we're meant to be together. I really feel like this is a God moment. I feel like this isn't just about us. For some reason, I feel like it's bigger than us." This is 7 years ago, way before the foundation. This is when I was still working in spec ops. I was there for about 3.5 years. So I didn't know what that meant or how, but I just kept feeling this sense of bigger, like there's something bigger here. Mm-hmm. And I realized that it was our story eventually that was the bigger piece, because for me as a veteran spouse, my dad served in the Air Force, but he was out before I was born. My brother was Air Force, but he left, I was 10 when he moved out of the house. So and he never came back. So I didn't really have this idea of what it meant to be a military spouse. My mom would talk about it a little bit. She had asked my dad to give up his time in service because she was very young, 21, when they got married, had kid, traveled Germany, Japan, and California. And she just said, "Listen, this isn't the kind of life that I want." He agreed to it. And so really I didn't have any experience. So when I became involved with Tom, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't even think PTSD. 7 years ago, the dialogue was much different. You would think, well, that's just, less than a decade ago, but it was. And sure. Nobody talked about it. For where people are kind of talking about it now, back then, it was just this silent thing that representativeness in the warrior class. So, for Tom, it was heavy drinking. At the time, I thought he was an alcoholic, which we've come to realize it was problem drinking. It was, part of PTS is reckless behavior, and that's how it shows up. And if you are looking at a lot of, well, my husband's military, it's part of the culture, a lot of them go out and drink and it's just what they do. But when that becomes the coping mechanism for not dealing with what you need to deal with, and that becomes a problem. So
what other reckless warning signs are there? What are some of the other behaviors?
So what we see most common, and certainly what we saw in our relationship as well, is affairs are all over the place. I mean, so incredibly common that when I started working in the community, it's not like I didn't know people who had affairs before. It's not like I didn't know people who were divorced, but it was every person.
Prevalent.
I'm not saying that every person was having an affair.
Sure.
Or every person was getting a divorce, but it touched every person in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never seen anything like that where, I'm Tom's fourth wife. And that wasn't uncommon, was to meet the second wife, the third wife. And it's just so much of that reckless behavior, for some it's gambling. We saw issues with gambling where people are losing their house, their cars, their marriages.
Oh, wow.
It's just anything that gives you that kind of adrenaline high, that thing that is helping you escape what you're trying to deal with. So
reckless adrenaline type behavior, pumping behavior. Okay. And you were seeing that in
fast. Like I hear a lot of wives are like, he will drive 90 miles an hour in a 35,
Okay. Wow.
He just doesn't give a crap,
Wow.
and he is living life in a very different space than most of us live in, when it's 100,000 miles an hour overseas, that you've got to be sharp. You're working to where you're only sleeping a few hours a night. Your life is in danger every single day. And then you come home and your honey's like, hey, mow the lawn and go to the grocery store. It really messes with your head.
Your brain, I would think the chemicals in your brain would actually change. And so it's almost like a substance abuse, I would think, when you're constantly getting a surge of certain chemicals and then all of a sudden, bam, it's done. It's probably almost like a withdrawal for some of them, I would imagine. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, where we see the greatest loss of life in veterans, if we're looking at 22 a day, which that number's probably a little low, actually. Special operations suicides tripled in 2018 and 19. So now the DOD is getting involved, like, okay, we've got to do something. But when you look at that, on average, it's 4 active compared to veteran. So the veteran population is committing suicide at a much higher rate. And we know that that's happening 1 to 3 years post-service because of the loss of tribe, because of the biological things that are happening that nobody's explained. Why are you so angry? Why are you so aggressive? Why can you not sleep? Why?
And really, this is and the real tragedy of the fact that we still haven't got a handle on this yet, and we're just now starting to see it be talked about and addressed, is you think about the men that fought in World War II or had to go to Vietnam, and you probably had a lot of broken men that came home, and back then this was not on the radar at all. You didn't talk about your feelings. You kind of tucked it all away and you went back to normal life, and then you just suffered in silence. So, you think about all of them, and it's just something that, I think it's great what you and Tom are doing. So you and Tom were dealing with these issues. So, what was it like? Would he snap? Would he just kind of turn on a dime? What did that look like?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the hardest things as a spouse, and what a lot of people have a really hard time understanding, is they think, oh, you're living with this person who's just out of control all the time. Like, how can you be in that space? Tom is mostly charming and funny and nurturing and an incredible caregiver to me and to the kids as well. So I have this amazing relationship with this amazing human who's been through some of the worst human experiences that a human can go through. And so, the way that his brain functions now is, if you have the parasympathetic nervous system, so your fight, flight response, most of us, you and I, kind of live with that turned off. because we're not in a state of trying to secure our safety and survive. But once you are in that place of constant survival, your brain has that switch flipped on all the time. So for me, like, I might spill my coffee over and have an oh crap moment and clean it up. For him, his brain immediately goes, there's chaos, something's out of control, find order, find it immediately. And by whatever means necessary. Is that a conscious thought? Absolutely not. It's not like Tom's like, hey, somebody spilled coffee all over the table and this is like war. No, in fact, that's the part that really screws people up, is because they know it doesn't warrant yelling or screaming or frantically trying to clean. And, but that's what happens because the brain is immediately trying to find order. And Tom will go back to his muscle memory. He'll go right back to how he was trained, some of the best training in the world to be able to do the job that he was able to do in Delta or any, specialized unit where you have constant training to act aggressively, violently, quickly. And so that reaction becomes a reaction at home. You can't just turn it off 4 months at a time. It just becomes your new normal, really.
So that's a lot. So this is something that I think is so imperative, especially for probably newcomers to special forces, because, especially if they go into this married, or I guess even if they get married, the wife doesn't understand, she just thinks he's being a jerk, or, it kind of almost reminds me of the response. Did you ever see the Johnny Cash movie?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, you got it with Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think he was having a little bit of shell shock from, this transition of becoming a star and going on the road. And he would come home and want to talk to his wife about his adventures. And she would just shut him down and be like, nope, when we're home, we're going to talk about regular things and you're just going to move on with life. And, it kind of, I'm sure that the woman, she misses her husband. She wants to see him, maybe she's even a little resentful that he's been gone for so long. And, he's been serving his country. Now he comes home and that's all he talks about. Is that in it? Do you think that can serve as an issue as well? So the woman doesn't recognize that?
Yeah, I do. I think actually that's a great analogy, because so many people look at the military as this completely foreign thing, but really they're American men and women who were just like you and I growing up, who then chose to volunteer to serve our nation. For most people, that looks very different than special forces, who then go to many, many schools. They have the equivalent to a master's degree. They are highly trained, they're highly intelligent, they're highly motivated, and they're extremely loyal to their job and to their brothers and sisters in arms. So really, it's almost required that your job comes first, with that kind of intensity, that kind of training, that kind of lifestyle. So anytime there's a competing attachment for anything in your life, and for most people, it might be, your children or your job, or hell, social media is a competing attachment. Anything
Absolutely.
That's taking your spouse's attention away from where you think it belongs. So whenever that happens, there's resentment. I think 30% of divorces now are coming from Facebook, I heard, because people are giving too much attention or attention away to something that's taking away from the relationship. So much of that is true. And again, I wasn't a military spouse. I work with military spouses, especially in special operations, all the time now. And they're amazing, wonderful women who don't have any education or training on what's either happening with their spouse or could happen to their spouse. That's why we go and do those talks now and do that training. Because for me, it was 2 years, like 2 years where every day I'm like, what is going on? Like,
did you feel
minute he's charming and funny and we're all having a great time, and bam, like that. I mean, like that.
Did you feel like you probably felt like you were walking on needles at the time? And
minefields all the time. I'd always joke about it. Didn't clean the minefields at the house today, so who knows when you're going to step on. And thank God, truly thank God, Tom knew my children were completely and utterly off limits. And so a lot of people will say, what's it like for your children? He does a very good job of maintaining control with my kids and with the family. Of course, I know he gets aggravated or angry from time to time, like any other person on the planet. But I've seen his explosive anger. I've seen violence. I've seen that aggression, and it's scary. I mean, when you think about it, our husbands are trained to kill other people and have
Yes.
many people, and some by use of hand or close quarter combat, So,
Well, I mean, the guy's nickname was Nightcrawler, wasn't it?
right. Yeah.
I mean, you're sleeping next to Nightcrawler, I mean, that's a pretty intimidating name for him to be called, and he's a legend among legends. So, of course, I'm sure when he would get out of control, I mean, I can imagine because it's not him almost. I'm sure it probably
It
feels like
wasn't.
it's like actually some other person came in and like invaded him, huh?
Crawler did, yeah. And
Yeah.
really, one of the pivotal points in our relationship was being able to identify that other person that was stepping into a relationship who had no business being in our relationship. And we have an amazing therapist. We brought her on at All Secure Foundation. She does a lot of work with us. She does our retreats, but she works with Tom and I personally too. And we've been working with her for over probably 18 months now. We've had so much success that we were like, we've got to share the world. We've got to get Stacy out here in the world because she's helped us so much. But one of the exercises she did was identifying different personalities or parts of ourselves. And at first I was like, what? Like personalities? Remember that like 80s movie where somebody had like 26 different personality types? And my
Well, and
brain,
there was that movie that just came out, Split. I don't know if you
yes,
saw that one where he had
split.
like 23
Yes,
personalities. Yeah.
yes. So I'm thinking, like, where's she going with this? But the
Hmm.
way she explained it, it was like light bulb. And then also, like, for me, whenever I learn information about PTS, it's light bulb and then lift. Like, okay, this is a way we can address it, or this is a way
It's
we can deal
it's
with
it's
it.
like you've identified an enemy and you're able to put a target on
Yes,
it at that point.
yes. And there are many. So, with Tom, his perfection driven aggression comes, and that's so common too. And that's one of the things that you'll always hear, like, oh, I had a military dad. And most people know exactly what that means. Oh, you had to have a really clean house. He had really high
Mhm.
standards. There was
I
anger.
had one of I had one of those.
Yeah. So,
Military my dad was Navy and man, whoo. I mean, he wasn't in the military by the time I came along, but it was like I did feel a lot of times as I got older, some of those he would. I mean, I felt like, man, I wonder if that's like his way of just being able to control his environment.
yeah, absolutely. Because control means safety.
Yes.
And we look at that very differently as civilians. But when he was able to identify, and Stacy had done this exercise, and the thing I love, love, love about Tom is every woo-woo kind of crazy thing I have thrown at him to try, he has fully agreed to it and gone in with like 100% Delta Force, like dedication, like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this,
That's love right
I,
there.
that,
That is
it,
love.
and that's the difference. When people say, like, well, how can you deal with this or that? I'm like, my husband tries every day of his life. He tries.
Well, and he obviously, it sounds like he takes ownership and he understands that
Absolutely.
he's doing it. It's not like he's dismissing it or just, if you can't deal with
Yeah.
it, then move on. He knows. I mean, and I think that that's probably one of the biggest, it's like an alcoholic, the
Yep.
first step is admitting you have a problem. So I would imagine for these other families that are just now going through this, identifying that it's a problem would probably be a big first step. I would think, isn't it? Would you say
Yes.
that's true?
Absolutely. Because, especially in the military culture, PTSD is taboo.
Hmm.
That's a sign of weakness. It's, I'm a warrior. I've been trained to do this. Nobody talks about it. So you assume the guy to your left and right are doing okay with it. They
Hmm.
don't know what's happening behind closed
And
doors.
that's what's really admirable about Tom. So for you, those of you watching that don't know, Tom, we'll talk about your organization here coming up, but Tom also wrote a book called All Secure, and Jen can go into the reasoning for the name behind that in a minute. But Tom lays out all of his issues. And being that he was, command sergeant major in Delta Force, I mean, he's so well respected, a legend among legends, this real life Jason Bourne figure who's done just the craziest things and probably one of the most elite warriors in the world. And he stepped out and said, look, I'm sure it's tough to say I have a problem. I'm sure it can almost feel embarrassing. Nobody would
Oh
look
yeah.
at him that way, but for him telling these issues, but the fact that he was so humble to say anything for my brothers and sisters, anything to let them know, to break that taboo and say, look, I did all these things. I'm a high elite warrior and I am struggling horribly from this. And he put it in a book for everybody to read. I mean, so the book's called All Secure for anybody. That Tom Satterly, All Secure, Amazon. Where else can they find it?
Really, any major bookstore. A lot of indies have it as well. And then you can get it at allsecurefoundation.org.
And I'll
We're
make sure I put a link up and everything
perfect.
too. But
Yeah.
yeah, but for him to do that, I mean, that's just such a humbling thing. And that's just to give him even that much more respect so that these other people. So right now, if you're listening and you have a spouse that you think is struggling with this and you're seeing this and going, oh my gosh, that's me, or that's our family, or that's him, like, get his book and get them to read it, because once that stigma comes off of him or her dealing with that, I think you're going to have a big break just there and you'll start on that road to healing your family, right?
Oh my gosh. I just had goosebumps because Tom will come in the room and he'll tease me because he's like, "Are you crying again?" Like, I'm a massive, massive empath. So I really take everyone's stories to heart. And the amount of emails and messages and social media messages that we have gotten since his book has come out. Really before that, just, when he is so incredibly brave. And when I say that, people always attribute that to like Saddam captures or Black Hawk Down and thousands of missions that he's been on. But I wasn't present. He wasn't my husband during those. And while I can completely and utterly respect, admire that Tom, I have a different Tom,
Yes.
and my Tom is very brave to me in a completely different way, which is, it was totally and utterly embarrassing for him to write that book. And he didn't want to do it for 2 years. He's like, Delta Force people don't write books. I mean, that was it. They don't write books. So I'm not going to write a book. And I said, I know, Tom, but we're on the phone 10 hours a day talking to people from your group, from Delta, from Green Berets, SEALs, Army Rank. We're talking to these guys, and it's the same thing that you have.
Yeah.
So how many more people can we reach if we put this in a book instead of me on the phone 11 hours a day, hang up, pick up,
Right.
which is still what we do, but you can affect so many more lives if you tell your story, but
Yes.
do it in a book. And for a good year and a half, I'm like, it's not about military stuff. If you want to write that book later, fine. But and he doesn't want to write that book.
Hmm.
But I knew the PTS story, if he could tell it, it would have impact on other people. And both of us get weepy, like the amount of people who are like, I saw myself exactly in this book. And we've had guys, big tough guys, that he knows, and I won't name names, but big other, influential leaders saying, I couldn't get through your book because I had to keep putting it down because it kept triggering me, or I kept crying through it.
Wow.
Just admitting that, oh my gosh, this was a really impactful book because it gave me permission to seek help, to understand it in a way. Some of his best friends just read the book right now, and it's been out since November. But one of them contacted him 2 days ago and said, I just read your book. I just finished it. I didn't know this stuff about biomarkers. So everybody picks up a different piece of it for themselves. Some people are like, I've read it 3 times. The first time was for the war stories because they're in Black Hawk Down and Saddam, some of the Delta Force selection, some of the things that people are interested in military history will pick it up for. And then they're like, oh my God, the last half of your book, like I wasn't expecting that. So I had to read the book with that in mind, and God, it's a different message.
Is he now that he's done it, he's got it out there and he's been on so many different shows. I mean, he's done a lot of national media engagements regarding this. Is he okay with it now? If he was embarrassed before, does he see it now that he's on the other side of it, or does he still struggle? Does he still struggle with it?
Yeah, I think leading up to it, when he was writing it, it was really cathartic because there were so many things that he was able just to get down on paper that he hadn't talked about before, that maybe he hadn't really addressed. And it was a hard process to write it for him. There's stuff that he's very embarrassed about, especially in our relationship. We talk a lot about in particular. Do we put that in the book? Do we not? What does that mean? And every time we decided, if this is going to help, if this is what's going to be the piece that triggers somebody to get help, then we just need to tell it. We have to. And
well, that and there's that and there's an honesty in that. I mean, like I was talking before, like nobody can come at you for your skeletons in your closet if you don't have any there. If you just put them out there and you say, this is who we are, this is what we've been through, take it or leave it. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, but in reality, I mean, I still see people on social media sometimes that will give you guys a hard time about Tom being out there and telling his stories. And I'm like, all right, like summon me, Jen. Let me go in there and handle these people because it's so, I'm irate. Like, how dare you disrespect this couple who has dedicated their lives to saving others, But so I guess my point is you're going to have critics. You could be Jesus walking on water. They would, be like, oh, he's just doing that for everybody to talk about him. I mean, there's just always haters out there. You're always going to, it's like they hate you because they ain't you. You know what I mean? I mean, even in your war struggles, and you might say that, but there are people that just want attention, and you guys have dedicated your life to giving others attention and fixing their lives. And so right now, and you have a book coming out. You're soon to be author. And I think it's really awesome because you're telling it from the other side. You're telling it from the side of a spouse. And even though, no, you weren't there during his military years, you have had to deal with the aftermath of it all. And you got to, bring this person back together and help assist to make him whole again. And obviously you were the right person to do that because, you're sensitive, but you're also tough and stubborn as nails too. And I know you're not going anywhere. So, I mean, it's such a cool thing that you're doing with your book. Tell us about your book coming out.
Sure. So really it was kind of born the same way Tom's was, which really came from a need. And so as much as we talk to special operation warriors, we also talk to spouses. And so many of the spouses feel the same way, which really for me, I guess I was surprised that the military active spouses didn't have a better handle on PTS. Because I was thinking, isn't this just part of the culture? Like, doesn't this just come with it? Don't y'all get in girlfriend circles and talk about the crazy crap your husbands do?
Yeah.
And I mean, I just had assumed, I had fallen into a couple veteran friends that I had met, wife friends from Tom. So meeting Tom's friends, current wives, who usually are number 3 and probably a lot like me, very empathy and totally outside of the world, that have come in going, what
just happened?
Yeah. But so I knew veteran spouses, especially that were dealing with PTS, could use the help. Like I could use the help, and I still could use the help. But the military wives just as much aren't talking to the girl to her left or right either. And
so they're suffering in silence too. Yes. Do you think that, why do you think that is? Is it like embarrassing to them to not admit that their marriage isn't healthy, or do you think that's what it is, an embarrassing thing?
Both. I think it's two things. I think one, we all want to project an image of happiness. You look at Facebook and people are like, man, everybody's life's great.
Fake book.
Exactly. And it's because people don't share their dirty laundry. And I don't think really they should share their dirty laundry. And every now and then when I see it, it's like write that tomorrow.
Right. Somebody was drinking and fake booking or Facebooking. Put it down, Karen.
Hit delete on that post, and then apologize, and then hit delete on that post, and just move on with your life, because girl, that was embarrassing. But I mean, and Tom and I try to keep it as real as possible. There's certain things in our relationship we feel are sacred that we just don't advertise to the world, but we do share our problems because people identify more with that.
You guys don't go and like air your dirty laundry on
No,
Facebook, like, oh, like Tom was being a dick today, like, or you guys do it in an after way, and you do it in a way that it's meant to help other people. I mean, it was this. Yeah, what's that? What'd you say?
constructively.
Constructed, yes, and it's to help other people. It's not
Yeah.
for people to be like, "Dang, Jen, I'm so sorry, man." Like, like you're most people who do that. There's the ulterior
Every
motive.
day. They'll be like, yes. And so I think part of it is human nature is we all want to project an image of success, in our work, in our lives, with our kids, with our marriages. Nobody wants to be like, hi, I'm the marriage over here while you guys are all posting your date night pictures that I want to put a pillow over his head every night, I'm in that marriage.
Right.
And then the other part of it is there is a code of secrecy, I guess is the best way to say it. And I don't mean secret like I'm sharing classified information, but in the sense that if you feel like your job is at risk because you can't do your job, then you're going to tell your wife, you better not ever tell anybody that I'm doing this crap at home because I can lose my job. Zip. I have women. So one of the platforms we have is called Virago. It's meant for women who have a husband who's a warrior and just kind of help to gather us all together, have a place to talk. And I've had so many people say, I follow you and I watch you, but I can't like or comment because my husband would kill me. Because,
oh, geez. Yeah.
And if it links back to my husband, who's still an active duty SEAL, like he literally will be like, our marriage will be over. So I'm here, I'm watching. I just, thanks for what you're doing, but I can't participate.
Do you think that there's a future if this becomes talked about more and addressed more? Are you guys working to try and change that culture to say, hey, if your wife's struggling, as long as she does it in a respectful way, she needs that support? Is that something that you guys are working to do or would work to do? Or do you think it's kind of just something that isn't really fixable?
I think it is fixable for sure. And I think it's going to take generations. Tom and I always talk that we're starting all secure foundation for our kids and their kids' generation is just as much as anyone else. So that's probably really when things are going to start taking effect. But somebody's got to start. Somebody's got to get on the dance floor first. And we're like, let's be that couple. Let's start trying to change the mindset that asking for help is weak, that, you're less of a warrior for it. So we actually go to the Department of Defense and we do a Pts Resiliency Training. So what we do is we go in and we talk about to young Green Berets who haven't even been to combat yet. This is what PTS looks like. These are the triggers and the warning signs. This is what to do if it happens. Because with PTS, if you ignore it, it gets worse over time, not better. And the guys keep thinking it'll just go away after the next deployment or when I get out or when I transition. And all it's doing is that sandwich where you're just making that, piling it up so high that you can't even put your mouth around it anymore. So what we want to do is say, take that bite. The first time you see that symptom or you see something or your wife says, hey, you're having issues, here's what you could do. You could go to command. You can go, we give resources. Here's things that you can do to help minimize. Because if you address it, then it minimizes and goes away. And
right.
PTS is for life. It doesn't have to be. And of course, with something as severe as Tom's, it probably will be for life. And we know that. And we've come to a piece of Tom's always going to have PTS. But now he manages it in a way that's, leading a good life for the rest of us. But we also work with a family readiness group. So those are the wives and the spouses. And that, for most in military culture, people don't show up. Like we've gone to groups where there's been 3 people, 3 wives that have showed up. And we're like, so what's going on? We just spoke to 500 of your husbands. And there's 3 of you here in the spouse after time. And we really got to dissect, and people are still afraid to be seen. They're still afraid to admit something's going on. Maybe their husband
even though the husbands went to this,
yes,
the spouses still are not. Do you think it's almost like because it's not an issue yet, it's just not at the forefront of their mind?
Right.
Like they've got all these other things they're doing with their life. Oh, why do I need to go to that? Like we don't have those issues. I mean, it almost seems like it seems like there just needs to be, what you guys are trying to do is you're taking a proactive measure. You're trying to get on top of it before it becomes a problem. But yeah, how do you get it? Like, it almost seems like I mean, yeah, how do you get the spouses to engage to know, hey, look, like, if you don't get on this and you're not proactive from the beginning to see, like, I mean, like for anybody, you don't smoke because you were told it causes cancer, right? So,
Right.
they tried the campaigns, don't even start smoking. Well, it's easier to not smoke, but then, it's like the same thing. Well, if you know the warning signs and you know that this can end up being an issue, like you need to inform yourself before it happens. And I mean, I really hope that you guys are able to make that something that these wives and families are serious about, because geez, just knowing what you guys have gone through and what numerous others have gone through, I mean, you almost want to say it's required, you have to go.
Yeah.
Like
Well, and, I think even so the next, which is kind of bummer, the next iteration was supposed to be in May, but that one we had it scheduled to be in the arena at 7 o'clock at night for couples to attend.
Okay.
So we're like, all right, let's put them both together. Childcare is offered next door for free.
Oh wow.
Take away excuses. It's an hour and a half of your time. And Tom and I don't get up there with like a PowerPoint slide and click through it. Like usually you can hear a pin drop through it because we're talking about really real stuff. And It's not meant to scare, it's meant to prepare.
Right.
And I think it's like, if you're a 25-year-old guy and somebody's like, hey, when you're 50, you have to get your prostate checked all the time. Like you're 25 and you're like, yeah, I'll worry about that when I'm 50.
Right. Exactly. Better analogy. Yes.
Yeah. Not even in my mirror yet of what I need to, focus on. So I'll just shove that away. But I'll tell you, the first time we spoke to this group, there's about 150. Mm-hmm. The last time there was like 450. And, I think it's connecting in this generation, this younger generation. I think they're getting it in a way that even Tom's generation was so conditioned not to, because Tom was raised up by Vietnam era.
Exactly.
People who were tired. They were burnt out, had
let's
tired, and it was suck it up, buttercup.
Let's face it, our generation, the Generation X, I mean, we were, I always joke around, I say we were feral kids. Like we pretty much raised ourselves, like, totally. I mean, our parents, like they were the first, like really, both parents worked, we were the outcome of that first generation. So I always joke with my brother and say we did a good job raising each other. I mean, my mom was there, they were there, but you know what I mean? I always say the parents in the 80s were like the Charlie Brown adults when you could hear them talk, like, so now I think because of that, our generation saw the error in a lot of that. And so now we're trying to reverse course and make sure that we have a better hands-on approach and communicate with our kids, especially try to pay attention. So I think you're right. I mean, hopefully we're doing good of a job where they're picking up on it and they're going to be more proactive even to be able to talk about their feelings. So I agree with you there. I think that's an important observation.
Spouses are doing that too. So the last FRG group that we met with, the spouses that are involved in that are very passionate. They are excited. They want the information. They even had Tom and I do a Zoom because we weren't able to go and present. And they were like, okay, this isn't happening to us yet, but it's good to know, because it's almost like somebody walking you through labor. And it's like, when you're done hearing about it, you're like, okay, now I know it's not this really abstract idea of what it's going to be like. And you go and you visit the hospital before and you see the room and you're like, okay, I get it. And now you don't know truly what it's like until you go through it. But somebody who's been there before is kind of helping you ease into it. And to be fair, and I'll say this, not every veteran is going to have PTS. In fact, a very small amount of veterans will actually have PTS, especially complex. Most 99% of our armed forces aren't engaging in firefights. Only 1% are. So
okay, but
at that 1%, then we've got an issue.
But at the same time, I mean, you can look at what's going on with coronavirus. The survivability rate is, way up there. It's like 98, 99%. And yet, we're taking all these precautions for it. I mean, why wouldn't we do the same to ensure if it saves just one life, has been kind of that campaign. So why not give the same care and consideration to our veterans?
Absolutely. Everything affects everyone differently. So how you manage stress, how I manage stress, how Tom and the guy down the street on managed stress is very different in trauma because we're biologically different from each other.
Yes. I would be so interested. I don't even know if it would ever happen or if it's on anyone's radar or if it would even be appropriate, but it would be so interesting to see if there's a study of people who went into this with the proactive knowledge that people like you are giving Tom and them coming out of the other side of combat, how they fare versus
Yeah.
people who did not go in with that. Like, I wonder if anybody would ever want to do a study on that and see, because it would be so interesting to see those outcomes and how they fare with the preparation up front.
Yeah, I agree. We've actually partnered with a research company, and they do research for special operations. So we have a call with them later today, and they're really starting to help us form all of our information and data collection so that we can give it to the DoD and say, listen, this works. This is
That's
how you get
awesome.
a warrior to be a sharper warrior. And I've had people ask me, in fact, the last time we were out there, if you train them with empathy, with understanding, you're giving them these tools to combat PTS, are you making them less of an effective warrior? Are they still going to be able to go over, kill, capture, and do their job?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, actually, they're going to do it much better because in what we've seen, and really a lot of this comes from Tom and Tom's experience of 25 years in the field of, he's had guys tank. I mean, literally tank, where he's had to send them home, send them to Betty Ford, send them to get cleaned up because
While they were in the field, like in mid-mission.
Yes.
Wow.
And we've heard about this repeatedly, where people are so professional, they do their jobs, and it's not that they're not functioning, it's that they've taken so much Ambien that they don't remember taking Ambien. So, they're not quite thinking straight. Or somebody might have a problem where they've become addicted to opioids or painkillers. Or booze is the most common medical treatment, really that the guys are using to self, and gals to self-medicate. So, when I talk about it, I'm like, hey, listen, when you're overseas, would you rather have the guy to your left and you've got a guy to your right? The guy to your left is drinking himself to sleep every night, sleeping a few hours. He's eating like crap. He's not taking care of himself. He's not taking care of his family and family issues. So he probably is thinking about, my wife's getting ready to leave, or what is she doing back home? There's a no trust situation happening. And he's maybe behaving recklessly, not acting exactly how he should be as a soldier. Or you've got the guy to the other side of you who is getting the right sleep, nutritionally taking care of himself. Sure, I'll have a drink or two with the guys, but can stop after 2 or 3. Is performing, and the mental fog isn't there because he's dealing mentally with what he needs to deal with, dealing with the family back at home, and making sure that he's communicating and everything's all right. I want that guy.
Exactly.
Who's
And
thinking clearly and performing better than the guy who isn't. You don't
exactly.
need
Absolutely.
to be He-Man to get the job done. You actually need to be a very smart thinker to get the job done.
And that's a really good description of what All Secure Foundation does, because obviously you are helping people heal with those same things, taking care of themselves nutritionally, mentally, spiritually, even. I know you guys address all of those components because they're all important components. So not are you trying to get them before they go in, but the ones that have already went in that didn't have the training and now they have to put the pieces of their life back together. That's really what All Secure does. And you guys have so many resources on your site, which I'll make sure is up here too. And you guys are doing, I know you guys are doing your Zoom conferences, I think on Thursdays, aren't you? Through All Secure. Is it through All Secure's Facebook page?
So right now we're running them through Tom's for some reason with All Secure Foundation. Like it gets really low on the list. Like all this whole
businesses.
World. Like I just wish I could give it to somebody else and say, just tell us where to be and when.
Yeah, sure.
Trying to figure out this stuff on a daily basis
Well,
is
you guys are a two-man show. I mean, you're dealing with, you're running the whole, I mean, I know you guys have a, couple like counselors and
yeah.
people that help, but such a new organization. I mean, I know you guys are starting to get help. In fact, you guys recently received some awesome funding, and I'll direct people to the cool video, the Vimeo video with the owner of Bass Pro Shops, the founder of
Yeah.
it, and
He's
at
great.
the Dirks Bentley concert, and then I think you've received the attention from August Bush the third, correct?
Yeah.
So you guys are really starting to, get more funding, be noticed for what you're doing. For anybody who's watching that wants to donate, make sure you go to All Secure Foundation. Is it .org?
You got it. Yep.
Yes. And obviously, you guys need to make sure you read Tom's book. I mean, I enjoy military movies and all that. But even if you don't, I mean, it is such a good read. Everybody I know, female, male, that's read it have just been like, excuse me, they've been just astounded. It's a book that it's fast moving. You can't put it down, and stay up to date with Jen and Tom because, Jen's going to have a book coming out soon. And so when you do, I'll have to have you back on to talk about that. And then, you guys, they need the support. I mean, we all have a duty. I say to people all the time, I'm like, you don't have to be rich, but if everybody was mandated to pick one day a month to go help somebody, your life, I think everybody's lives would change for the better.
Love that.
Soup kitchen, help with the veterans, anything, talk, just something. Everybody should be doing some kind of a community service to help, because I know too, a lot of times when people start feeling better, I've heard veterans say when they started feeling better was when they started helping somebody else. When you take the focus off yourself, it just makes it better. So if you have not picked anything to do yet to, maybe that once a month community service, do something to help Tom and Jen, whether it's raise awareness, donate, whatever. I mean, I'm sure they have all kinds of resources that they can tell you about on All Secure, and ask them how they can help. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's been awesome talking to you, and I think it's wonderful what you guys are doing and how All Secure was born out of a need, and like you said, it definitely was something bigger than just you and Tom, and you're a very intuitive person. Obviously, you knew it, but you just didn't know what that would look like. And anybody who's watching, you see that, like she said, they started off in a nightmare and now they're in a honeymoon phase. So if you're in a period where you feel like your marriage is done or you feel like you've hit a dead end, I mean, don't give it. Just be tough, be persistent, be stubborn. I mean, I also been married for 21 years. We've had our challenges, and I think, we're both stubborn. We just like either one of us, like, you're quitting for, I'm not quitting for you. Like, I'm not quitting. You might hate me, but I'm not quitting, so just keep that attitude. And eventually I like you, I don't want to put the pillow over my head and my husband's head anymore. And same with him, like, we're best friends. I mean, we went through our rough times, and you and Tom too. So it's good that you guys are putting it out there. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you for having me. It was great to see you.
It was so great to see you too. And like I said, we'll have you back on soon. For those watching, I always forget to say this. Please subscribe to my channel. Signed, sealed, delivered. Thank you. Bye.